The Human Cycle by Sri Aurobindo. Chapter 8. Civilization and Barbarism. The modern world does not leave room for a repetition of the danger in the old form or on the old scale. Science is there to prevent it. It has equipped culture with the means of self-perpetuation. It has armed the civilized races with weapons of organization and aggression and self-defense, which cannot be successfully utilized by any barbarous people, unless it ceases to be uncivilized and acquires the knowledge which science alone can give. It has learned, too, that ignorance is an enemy it cannot afford to despise, and has set out to remove it wherever it is found. The ideal of general education, at least to the extent of some information of the mind and the training of capacity, owes to it, if not its birth, at least much of its practical possibility. It has propagated itself everywhere with an irresistible force and driven the desire for increasing knowledge into the mentality of 3 continents. It has made general education the indispensable condition of national strength and efficiency, and therefore imposed the desire of it not only on every free people, but on every nation that desires to be free and to survive, so that the universalization of knowledge and intellectual activity in the human race is now only a question of time. For it is only certain political and economic obstacles that stand in its way, and these the thought and tendencies of the age are already laboring to overcome. And in some, science has already enlarged for good the intellectual horizons of the race, and raised, sharpened, and intensified powerfully the general intellectual capacity of mankind. It is true that the first tendencies of science have been materialistic, and its indubitable triumphs have been confined to the knowledge of the physical universe, and the body, and the physical life. But this materialism is a very different thing from the old identification of the self with the body. Whatever its apparent tendencies, it has been really an assertion of man, the mental being, and of the supremacy of intelligence. Science, in its very nature, is knowledge, is intellectuality, and its whole work has been that of the mind, turning its gaze upon its vital and physical frame and environment to know and conquer and dominate life and matter. The scientist is man, the thinker, mastering the forces of material nature by knowing them. Life and matter are, after all, our standing ground, our lower basis, and to know their processes and their own proper possibilities, and the opportunities they give to the human being, is part of the knowledge necessary for transcending them. Life and the body have to be exceeded. But they have also to be utilized and perfected. Neither the laws nor the possibilities of physical nature can be entirely known unless we know also the laws and possibilities of supraphysical nature. Therefore, the development of new and the recovery of old mental and psychic sciences have to follow upon the perfection of our physical knowledge. And that new era is already beginning to open upon us. But the perfection of the physical sciences was a prior necessity, and had to be the first field for the training of the mind of man in his new endeavor to know nature and possess his world. Even in its negative work, the materialism of science had a task to perform, which will be useful in the end to the human mind in its exceeding of materialism. But science, in its heyday of triumphant materialism, despised and cast aside philosophy, its predominance discouraged by its positive and pragmatic turn the spirit of poetry and art, and pushed them from their position of leadership in the front of culture. Poetry entered into an era of decline and decadence, adopted the form and rhythm of a versified prose, and lost its appeal and the support of all but a very limited audience. Painting followed the curve of Cubist extravagance and espoused monstrosities of shape and suggestion. The ideal receded, and visible matter of fact was enthroned in its place, and encouraged an ugly realism and utilitarianism. In its war against religious obscurantism, science almost succeeded in slaying religion and the religious spirit. But philosophy had become too much a thing of abstractions, a seeking for abstract truths in a world of ideas and words, rather than what it should be, a discovery of the real reality of things, by which human existence can learn its law and aim, and the principle of its perfection. Poetry and art had become too much cultured pursuits to be ranked among the elegances and ornaments of life, concerned with beauty of words and forms and imaginations, rather than a concrete seeing and significant presentation of truth and beauty, and of the living idea and the secret divinity in things, concealed by the sensible appearances of the universe. Religion itself had become fixed in dogmas and ceremonies, sects and churches, and had lost, for the most part, except for a few individuals, direct contact with the living founts of spirituality. A period of negation was necessary. They had to be driven back and in upon themselves, nearer to their own eternal sources. Now that the stress of negation is past, and they are raising their heads, we see them seeking for their own truth, reviving by virtue of a return upon themselves and a new self-discovery. They have learned, or are learning, from the example of science, that truth is the secret of life and power, and that by finding the truth proper to themselves, they must become the ministers of human existence. But if science has thus prepared us for an age of wider and deeper culture, and if, in spite of, and even partly by its materialism, it has rendered impossible the return of the true materialism, that of the barbarian mentality, it has encouraged, more or less indirectly, both by its attitude to life and its discoveries, another kind of barbarism, for it can be called by no other name, that of the industrial, the commercial, the economic age, which is now progressing to its culmination and its close. This economic barbarism is essentially that of the vital man who mistakes the vital being for the self and accepts its satisfaction as the first aim of life. The characteristic of life is desire and the instinct of possession. Just as the physical barbarian makes the excellence of the body and the development of physical force, health, and prowess his standard and aim, so the vitalistic or economic barbarian makes the satisfaction of wants and desires and the accumulation of possessions his standard and aim. His ideal man is not the cultured, or noble, or thoughtful, or moral, or religious, but the successful man. To arrive, to succeed, to produce, to accumulate, to possess is his existence. The accumulation of wealth and more wealth, the adding of possessions to possessions, opulence, show, pleasure, a cumbrous, inartistic luxury, a plethora of conveniences, life devoid of beauty and nobility, religion vulgarized or coldly formalized, politics and government turned into a trade and profession, enjoyment itself made a business. This is commercialism. To the natural, unredeemed, economic man, beauty is a thing otiose, or a nuisance, art and poetry a frivolity, or an ostentation, and a means of advertisement. His idea of civilization is comfort. His idea of morals, social respectability. His idea of politics, the encouragement of industry, the opening of markets, exploitation and trade following the flag. His idea of religion, at best, a pietistic formalism, or the satisfaction of certain vitalistic emotions. He values education for its utility in fitting a man for success in a competitive, or it may be a socialized, industrial existence. Science for the useful inventions and knowledge, the comforts, conveniences, machinery of production with which it arms him, its power for organization, regulation, stimulus to production. The opulent plutocrat and the successful mammoth capitalist and organizer of industry are the supermen of the commercial age, and the true, if often occult rulers of its society. The essential barbarism of all this is its pursuit of vital success, satisfaction, productiveness, accumulation, possession, enjoyment, comfort, convenience for their own sake. The vital part of the being is an element in the integral human existence as much as the physical part. It has its place, but must not exceed its place. A full and well-appointed life is desirable for man living in society, but on condition that it is also a true and beautiful life. Neither the life nor the body exist for their own sake, but as vehicle and instrument of a good higher than their own. They must be subordinated to the superior needs of the mental being, chastened and purified by a greater law of truth, good, and beauty, before they can take their proper place in the integrality of human perfection. Therefore, in a commercial age, with its ideal, vulgar and barbarous, of success, vitalistic satisfaction, productiveness, and possession, the soul of man may linger a while for certain gains and experiences, but cannot permanently rest. If it persisted too long, life would become clogged and perish of its own plethora, or burst in its straining to a gross expansion. Like the too massive Titan, it will collapse by its own mass. Mole ruet sua.